Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for joining us on this Thursday, July 9th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. Before we get started, here are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. Washington's top man on North Korea, Stephen Biegun's last day in Seoul, and he will be meeting with officials at the nation's top office before heading to Japan. Will his trip lead to a Kim-Trump summit, as the U.S. president has hoped for? Inside North Korea, new satellite imagery shows suspected activity at its previously undeclared nuclear facility in the village of Wonlori near capital Pyongyang. Researchers suspect that the site is being used to build nuclear warheads. Plus, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will issue new guidelines for reopening schools after President Trump criticized the agency's recommendations as too impractical. He had threatened that he will cut federal funding if U.S. schools do not open. Still, about a quarter of the world's total COVID-19 cases have been recorded in the United States. Our starting point this morning, the visiting U.S. pointman on North Korea, Stephen Biegun, is expected to visit South Korea's presidential office of Cheongwade shortly. It's thought that Biegun, who's also the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, will be holding talks with Seoul's newly appointed National Security Advisor, Seo Hoon. Now, the attention is on whether Biegun will have an additional message for North Korea, and this as Biegun on Wednesday, after meeting with officials at Foreign Ministry, said the U.S. strongly supports inter-Korean corporations, adding that he's ready to resume negotiations with the North at any time. And after wrapping up his three-day stay in Seoul, Biegun will be heading over to Japan for talks with officials there. Now, despite efforts to bring North Korea back to the negotiation table, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper once again named the North as one of a number of, quote, rogue states that concern Washington. In a virtual meeting with his counterparts from Australia and Japan on Tuesday local time, the three sides share their strong concern that North Korea's ballistic missile program poses a serious threat to international security. Esper also grouped China, Russia, and Iran as rogue states. And he also made similar remarks back in February while discussing the Trump administration's national defense strategy. Inside North Korea, new satellite imagery shows that North Korea's nuclear program could be active at a previously undeclared facility, citing images from the U.S.-based Earth imaging company Planet Lab on Wednesday local time. Researchers said recent activity at the facility in the village of Wonlori near capital Pyongyang shows that it might be used to build nuclear warheads. Jeffrey Lewis, a North Korea expert at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, said that the facility has all the features of a nuclear facility, including a security perimeter, on-site housing, and an underground facility. Now, the prospects for a third North Korea-U.S. summit happening before America's presidential election in November might be brightening, as U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he's open to meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. However, watchers say an intense degree of diplomatic efforts would be required to make that happen. Our Lee Seung-jae with more.
In an interview with Gray Television on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump signaled that he's open to holding another summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, despite Pyongyang's repeated claims that it has no intention of doing so. The latest comments appear to show the U.S. president could be pushing for a summit in October to boost his chances of winning re-election in the following month. Experts in Washington have also expressed optimism that a summit could happen. President Trump's remarks come as U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun is in Seoul to discuss North Korea-related issues, which in some people's eyes raises the possibility of another face-to-face between the two leaders. The need for a third summit was also raised by President Moon Jae-in, who said his administration will do all it can to facilitate it. However, despite the interest expressed by Seoul and Washington, it remains to be seen if the North will be interested. Experts say the reality is much more difficult, as the North would only accept if there's a new approach to the denuclearization talks, namely the lifting of economic sanctions on North Korea. Trump and Kim have met 3 times since June 2018, with one involving President Moon. However, Their subsequent lower-level meetings failed to make such progress, as they remained far apart over the scope of North Korea's denuclearization and sanctions relief from the U.S. But with less than 4 months to go until the U.S. election, time may be running out for all parties, as it could be the best, if not the only chance in the near future to achieve the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. 이승재, Arirang News.
Back here in the nation, South Korea's southwestern city of Gwangju is seeing a fast spread of COVID-19. Now, since the start of the second wave of cases late last month, the city has reported more than 100 cases in less than just 2 weeks. According to health authorities on Thursday, an additional 15 people tested positive, including a 12-month-old infant who contracted the virus along with his family members. The sudden spike in cases started with the outbreak related to door-to-door sales companies, and it has since impacted a nursing home, sauna, and church. And as infections in other regions have hit gyms, private academies, and apartments, health authorities have warned that there is no safe place, and people should keep in mind that they could be infected at any time. The number of COVID-19 cases in the United States now stands at over 3 million after breaking a record of 60,000 daily coronavirus cases this week for the first time since the pandemic first broke out. Now, due to sudden jumps in numbers, states are facing an impending shortage of beds in intensive care units. Health authorities reported 56 intensive care units in the state of Florida, one of the hotspots in the U.S., which have already hit capacity, and less than 20% of beds were available on Tuesday local time. Over in Texas, which recently surpassed 10,000 daily cases, the number of hospitalized patients more than doubled in just 2 weeks. Now, the number of confirmed patients is expected to rise as health authorities plan to conduct 5,000 tests a day by making new testing facilities in regions seeing rapid resurgences. Following months of online learning, many in the U.S., including U.S. President Donald Trump, believes it's high time schools reopen for in-person classes. Urging states to open schools in the fall, President Trump is threatening to sever federal funding if they opt to stay closed. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump is pressuring state governors to reopen schools this fall despite a continuous spike in the number of COVID-19 cases across the country.
So we're very much going to put pressure on governors and everybody else to open the schools, to get them open. And it's very important. It's very important for our country. It's very important for the well-being of the student and the parents. So we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on open your schools in the fall.
President Trump took to Twitter Wednesday to threaten to cut off federal funding to schools that choose not to open for in-person classes this fall. While U.S. school districts are mostly funded by their respective state budgets, he's referring to a portion of the federal budget that's allocated to fund schools nationwide. He also explained that many countries like Germany, Denmark, and Norway have successfully reopened schools with no major issues despite the pandemic. The U.S. CDC also stressed that detailed quarantine guidelines for schools, including social distancing and body temperature screening, will be rolled out next week. President Trump's call to reopen schools comes as U.S. immigration officials announced this week their plans to bar visas for international students who are studying in online-only programs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In response, Harvard University and MIT have filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration in an attempt to block the plan. Harvard University said Wednesday that the government's move has been designed to pressure schools to open their on-campus classes this fall without regard for the health and safety of students and faculty members. The question of reopening schools has become an acute one for tens of millions of parents and children across the U.S. following months of remote learning. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
8 candidates are in the race for the top job at the World Trade Organization, seeking to convince its 164 member nations that they are the man or woman that can steer the global agency through this unprecedented time of COVID-19 and intensifying global trade tensions. One of the 8 is South Korea's Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee. But does she stand a chance of landing the prestigious gig? Our Park Se-young with more.
The campaign to lead the World Trade Organization during the most stormy era of its 25-year existence has begun. From dealing with the global economic recession caused by COVID-19 to tackling the US-China trade war, the next Director General has a lot on their plate. And South Korea's Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee is running for the top job. She has vowed to improve the agency's processes and re-establish its position of resisting global protectionism.
With all my experience and competency, I pledge to resolve the difficulties that WTO members are facing and open a new future for the agency.
Starting her public service career back in 1992, Yoo is a renowned trade negotiator with 25 years of experience. She's also the third South Korean to run for the post. She'll be competing against 7 other contenders from the UK, Saudi Arabia, Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, Moldova, and Mexico. If Minister Yoo does win, she'll be the WTO's first female leader. The previous heads of the WTO and its predecessor, the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, have typically come from European countries like France and Switzerland. The Washington Post has noted that there's a strong push among Geneva trade delegates to select a woman to lead the agency for the first time. Experts say the chances of Yoo Myung-hee winning are 50-50.
As almost the only country in the world that has grown so much through trade, South Korea has a lot to share and offer to other developing countries. And Korea will also have more opportunities to speak out and improve systems, including those related to trade conflicts.
Japan claimed earlier on Tuesday that it would try to prevent Yoo from winning. Despite Japan's pressure, experts note Tokyo's influence will be limited considering its lack of standing in the WTO. As the current Director General will be stepping down at the end of August, the WTO plans to shorten the 9-month-long selection process. During that process, the candidates will present themselves to the WTO's membership campaign for support and sit for a Q&A session with the WTO General Council. The General Council will then narrow the field of candidates until they reach a consensus around a single contender. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Good morning. A steamy heat wave will ramp up in the central parts of the country today. In fact, parts of Gangwon-do province, including Chuncheon, are under a heat wave advisory. But southern provinces could get some relief from the heat, but that relief won't be much of the welcome for the south because a monsoonal front that lashed Japan with torrential rain is now making its way towards Korea. It will start to pound Jeju this afternoon, gradually spreading up north. So Jeju and southern coastal regions are forecast to see heavy downpours of more than 200 millimeters through Saturday. The capital and central regions will receive 5 to 40 millimeters tomorrow. So for next 2 days, southern parts of the country will need to brace for extreme rain. Meanwhile, the rest of the country will be under dazzling sunshine this afternoon. Seoul and Chuncheon both getting up to a scorching 33 degrees Celsius this afternoon, so take extra care in the hot weather. The heat will ease with the monsoon showers, and do expect frequent showers for the next few days nationwide. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that'll do it for this edition of Arirang News, but we'll be back with more of the day's headlines coming up in our later newscast at noon Korea time, so stick around. Thanks for watching.